Hey YouTube, Jim here. Welcome to Top 10 Archive. If you've spent significant time without Wi-Fi, your mind has probably started wondering about other ways to communicate. Smoke signals, drawings with sticks, and the dirt in your backyard. Hey, what about in a container, such as this one? Today we're talking about one of the most interesting ways to send a message. Here are the top 10 people who found messages in a bottle.
Number 10. Captured by pirates. Our first message in a bottle is rather recent, from back in 2011, a time when we don't imagine you'd have too many pirate encounters. It was from a crew of captured seamen trapped in their own vessel in a sealed and armored area. They managed to throw a message in a bottle out to sea to tell what had happened. It explained that they were safe but under capture. In response to finding the message, 2 Special Forces ships stormed the vessel to save them. Everyone came out safe and the pirates were arrested. Number 9. 76 years at sea. Our next message in a bottle was in the ocean for about 76 years after being tossed overboard from a ship going to Australia from England. A man named Jeff Flood found it in New Zealand and opened the note, handwritten on SS Strathnever stationery, which read, "At sea. Would the finder of this bottle kindly forward this note, where found, date, to under-mentioned address." The ship was a British Royal Mail ship which transported passengers between England and Australia. Unfortunately, the writer had died in the 1940s, but he did find his grandson who had no other connection to his grandfather than that very bottle. Number 8. I said I'd write. Mary, you're a really great person. I hope we can keep in correspondence. I said I would write. Your friend always, Jonathan, Nova Scotia, 85. This is what our next message in a bottle read when found 28 years later on the coast of Croatia. It seems Mary might have been left waiting, thinking poorly of Jonathan and his word, perhaps. It had gone 4,000 miles at least, counting just from point A to point B, though it probably bounced around much more than that. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem that the kite surfers that found it ever tried or succeeded in finding Mary or Jonathan. Number 7. An incredible ending. Our next bottle made its way from Hawaii to Thailand after 4 long years at sea. In 1979, Dorothy and John Peckham would write notes and throw them overboard their cruise inside champagne bottles. They put $1 in every bottle to cover postage for anyone who opened the bottle to send a reply. Then, in 1983, the reply came. It was from a man named Hoa Van Nguyen, who had served in the Vietnamese army. He and his brother had found the bottle while floating off the coast of Thailand as they attempted to flee the communist regime in Vietnam. It didn't end there, of course. The exchange went on for some time, and Van Nguyen asked the Peckhams if they could help his family flee and take refuge in the United States. The family worked with U.S. immigration, and in 1985, they met in person when the Van Nguyen's flight into Los Angeles landed. Number 6. A sailor and a fisherman. It seems finding a letter in a bottle really makes you feel tied to a person. If you didn't get that feeling from the last bottle, you'll certainly be convinced now. It all started when a man named Aki Viking, a sailor from Sweden, wrote a letter and sent it out to sea in a bottle back in 1955. He wrote to someone beautiful and far away and asked any lady to reply. Now, it seems a bit desperate, but in the 1950s, it certainly would have seemed like fate. It wasn't a woman who found it, though. It was a fisherman. He gave it to his daughter as a joke, but she replied anyway, translating with the help of a priest. They exchanged letters until Viking visited her. They married not long after, in 1958. This goes to show that even if your love letter isn't received by the right person at first, there's no reason to lose hope. Number 5. A last goodbye. A year after the Titanic sank, a letter washed ashore in a bottle with a small message from one of the deceased passengers. While many of the Titanic's passengers and items were buried at sea, it was this letter and a small bottle of holy water that made it just a few miles from his home. The letter read, "From Titanic, goodbye all. Burke of Glanmere, Cork." He and his cousin both died in the tragic sinking and never reached their family in Boston. Number 4. to my wife. This seaweed-covered bottle was thrown into the ocean by a British Army soldier, Thomas Hughes, who wrote a letter to his wife before going in to fight in World War I. He threw it into the English Channel, asking anyone who found it to send it to his beloved. It read, "Dear wife, I am writing this note on this boat and dropping it into the sea just to see if it will reach you. If it does, sign this envelope on the right-hand bottom corner where it says receipt. Put the date and hour of receipt and your name where it says signature, and look after it well. Ta-ta, sweet, for the present. Your hubby." Heartbreaking as it is, Hughes was killed just 2 days later, and his wife never received the letter. The bottle wasn't found until 2 decades after her death, 85 years after it was written. The fishermen who found it in the River Thames delivered it to their daughter, who was just 2 years old when her father died. Number 3. The oldest ever found? Said to be the oldest message in a bottle ever to be found, this message from a Japanese seaman and his crew of 43 tells the story of their adventure in 1784. It was written on coconut tree bark and sent into the ocean to retell the search for buried treasure on an island in the South Pacific. The crew was shipwrecked by a storm before returning home, but their message was found 151 years later in 1935 on the shore of a Japanese island said to be the writer's birthplace. Number 2. A life-saving message. In 2019, a family of 3, a father, his partner, and his 13-year-old son, were backpacking at the Arroyo Seco River in California. They were by no means amateur, the father, Curtis, closely familiar with the trip after accomplishing it dozens of times. However, on this particular trip, they almost died. They were trapped between 4-foot rocks and a strong current. They'd planned to float down the river, but the currents were unexpectedly difficult to pass. So what did they do? They wrote a message on paper they luckily had on hand and sent it down the river in a water bottle. On the bottle, they scratched "Help." They were lucky a couple of hikers found the message and alerted authorities. The following day, they were rescued by the California Highway Patrol. Number 1. An interesting experiment. Captain C. Hunter Brown was a scientist at the Glasgow School of Navigation, where he found himself studying the currents of the North Sea. To test a theory, he sent 1,890 messages in bottles in 1914 and requested that the receiver state where and when the card was found and respond from the nearest post office. In 2012, this particular bottle was found 9.38 nautical miles from where it was sent almost 98 years previously by a Scottish skipper named Andrew Leeper. Perhaps a bit late to the experiment, but we're sure Hunter Brown is smiling somewhere. Thanks for watching. Pretty interesting stuff, right? What message would you put in a bottle for someone to find? Let us know in the comments. Send us a message that you like this channel. Be sure to subscribe, click the bell, and help keep us afloat by giving this video a thumbs up.